We didn't see any companies that focused on private data. And that was very concerning, especially given that everything we were interacting with, whether it was Web3 or going into this AI era, it's all about private data, right? And so our initial focus as a team was we really needed to give the empowerment back to the user, especially as we see the evolution of technology in this new kind of way that we interact with the world.
None of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by WAGB Ventures or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Hey everyone, Benga here with another WAGB Ventures podcast episode. On today's episode, we're joined by Francis Berewa. He's the founder of zkPass. zkPass is a decentralized Oracle protocol that transforms private internet data into verifiable proofs on-chain. For anyone who is new, this is the WAGB Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting builders, founders, investors across crypto and AI. Check out wagbventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. All right, I know this dude is eager to drop solid insights, so let's just get into it here with Francis. Hey, Francis, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'm actually anticipated talking to you because these are always interesting discussions with other founders and people in the space. So I definitely am looking forward to this conversation, and I appreciate you having me today.
Yes, sir. All right, let's jump into it. Let's start with your crypto story, man. How did it all start? How did you get into crypto?
And it's taking me back. Actually, I got into this space, man, it's been some years. Indirectly, it was about 2014, but I really didn't start to engage and pay attention to it until about 2016 and 17. At that time, I had one of my startups in New York, always busy hustling and bustling, as you know how the city energy sort of drags you. But I had an opportunity to meet a very good friend, a lifelong friend now, and a partner. His name was Michael Robinson. And we would usually, after work, we would chill at a cafe, talk about business, talk about the industry, about markets. We did that quite a few times. It was almost like a de-stress moment, but also where that I didn't realize it at that time, but that's really when the journey began, because it was also during the Wild West of the ICO days. And, basically everybody was coming out with something. Ethereum was coming out. And at that time, the only thing people who really were advocates, what they would do is start reading up the white paper. And that's where I was introduced to it through my friend. And the rest is history. Everybody knows about the rabbit hole story. That's essentially my little journey. So 2016, 17, I happened to meet a friend. I met him at a gym. And then, we're talking about investments, we're talking about stocks. And then it's like, you have to look at these new asset classes. And, safe to say, I'm glad I paid attention at that moment, because that opened up a lot of doors for me. And yeah, that's a quick summary of it.
Awesome. And you graduated from the ICO days to jump all the way into the deep end here. So I know we're going to be talking a lot about zero knowledge, but before we jump into it, let's just educate the audience. What is ZK? What is zero knowledge? And what is the importance of privacy in crypto?
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, starting from the basic, right? I like to use examples sometimes, like scenarios. So let's imagine a world where you can prove anything about yourself, like your age or credit score, without ever showing the actual details. That's essentially what zero knowledge proofs are, right? It's especially us as zkPass, which of course I'll get into, but we are a privacy first protocol, right? We are built on zero knowledge proofs themselves. And what ZK proofs in this case basically do is they're letting you keep your data secure while still proving what matters. Essentially, in this case, that's a very generalized term. I will go a little bit further and say the terminology that crypto Twitter and other people may be leveraging and using and that people see is zkTLS, which is zero knowledge TLS. And essentially those are the cryptographic technique that allows the prover, which in this case will be a user, to demonstrate that a connection or a traditional web server, like if you go to a website, a social media, a web server is occurred and returned specific data, meaning like whether you logged in and so forth, without revealing sensitive details or sharing the raw data itself. That is, coming from a zero knowledge proof to going what zkTLS is, because that is what the key thing is, right? So in an example of a bank, let's say zkTLS will let you prove what a bank said without showing what the bank said, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. Think, that's one of the things that you are actually pioneering here, that privacy preserving piece of, identity verification while sharing the data that does matter. You know, what inspired you to focus on like ZK proofs, and how do you envision this technology reshaping trust in digital interactions?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, think about it from this perspective. So for us, first of all, the team, I mean, we were I wouldn't say we were an opportunistic team. The team came from people who knew each other. Some of us were co-founders together previously. Others, we went to school together, and others, were just like friends, right? So it was really a coalition that came together to create this. But when we were brainstorming, and the idea that initially came to fruition focused on data, right? That was the main key component. What we realized is a lot of people don't really understand the value of data, but more so the value of personal data or private data in this case. And private data is essentially anything that requires you to log in, or a user to have an access point, meaning that not public data like, oh, if I can go to a weather channel, or I can go to a public news article or a blog post, that's public data. That's fine. But anything that requires, an input, whether it's an email and a password to log in, is automatically considered private data. It doesn't matter how important you think it is. Private data is essentially the most important data that we have. So though we have oracles like Chainlink and so forth that focuses on private, we didn't see any companies that focused on, Chainlink focusing on public, we didn't see any companies that focused on private data. And that was very concerning, especially given that everything we were interacting with, whether it was Web3 or going into this AI era, it's all about private data, right? And so our initial focus as a team was we really needed to give the empowerment back to the user, especially as we see the evolution of technology in this new kind of way that we interact with the world. But we also needed to ensure that we were compliant, right? Because when you deal with data, you're having to deal with whether it is GDPR or any other kind of regulatory bodies. And so we decided, you know what, we're going to do this, but we're also going to make sure that we're very compliant. And that is why, from our Oracle perspective, we actually do not access or store data. We just enable verification and authorization, like basically ensuring that your data is verified and authenticated, and it's still in your hands as a user. So that's what inspired us to move forward. And it was not an easy journey, but I'm glad that, the world saw this. And of course, a lot of builders and a lot of other protocols are out, and I couldn't be happier to see it, because it solidified and validated the space that at times we were a little bit, nervous in how long it would take for them to adapt.
Right. That's fantastic. And I mean, it's kind of expected when you first launch with something that is a bit revolutionary or sort of changes legacy systems. And now, yes, we are beginning to see more broader adoption of it. Would be helpful, though, if you could share like a real world example of how zkPass's technology solves problems that traditional identity systems can't. That will help us contextualize and visualize what you guys are doing today or delivering to the users today.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. The thing about it is, identity is the first gateway entry in anything, right? That's why when we say private data, whether you're logging in with your email or your password, it automatically is considered private data. That's essentially because, it's the first gateway, whether you want to do KYC, whether you want to do like AML and so forth. Every entry point to certain ecosystems have some sort of gated way, unless, as I mentioned, it was public data. So from our perspective, of course, identity is key, and that is the first thing. And we want to enable users to have the ability to disclose, and I guess not be limited if they care so much about data, because whenever we're making accounts, not everyone has a time or interest to read all of the privacy policy or terms of use and everything else. But what they don't realize is, whether everywhere from banking to healthcare to, you name it, they have certain information and how they store that information as far as your data. as a user that at times you don't know what's happening to that data. There's so many leakage that happens on a daily basis, whether they're reported or not, that us as users kind of don't understand and are not always on the pulse of. So in our situation, of course, we are able to enable things like, proof of humanity, right? What if you're able to prove that you're human, but without having to reveal a lot of sensitive information? Maybe it's as simple as, hey, prove that you own a bank account and it's in your name, but you don't have to really have people have access to your bank account. Or you're proving that you did something that only a human can do, like took an Uber ride, and simple examples like that. But you can also go as deep as actual KYC, right? Like, let's say if you are leveraging a KYC that uses a zkTLS and you're able to verify yourself once, and you don't have to always go and provide the documentations in the future. Let's say you want to enter DeFi protocols. In this case, what if you were just able to use your proof or a key that lets any system say, this person has already KYC and verified before, and that enables them to give you access. There's a lot of different ways that we can be creative with this kind of technology. The most important thing is that it works with 99% of the internet, right? Which is basically websites. It's HTTPS. So, there's way more than 1.8 billion websites in the industry, in the market, and only about 20,000 of them are open to, like APIs. So there's a lot of gated, I guess, ecosystems that have all of our information, but we really don't have a say. And that's why, technology like zkTLS that is adaptable to not only these systems, but new systems is brilliant, because you don't have to change how you interact with these sites, but you kind of can know and have a lot more empowerment on your data and how you disclose and reveal it. And these systems or businesses can still leverage what they need in order to conduct their businesses, knowing that they're still compliant and that their users are happy. So, going into the original question that you had with respect to, how it could be leveraged in a traditional identity, as I mentioned, the KYC process, it could be made easier, where people don't have to always reveal information, upload all documentations and every kind of protocol or business they interact with. Maybe you use your data once, you verify once, and you use it across a whole bunch of other systems, knowing where you shared it and knowing that these people have access, right? Maybe you have one central databases as a user that you also control. Other ways is even banking, right? Like from the perspective of why it matters. Like, how can you trust banks, given that sometimes financial systems are the biggest targeted systems in the world? How do we know that the financial data is real, and how do we prove without exposing that? Well, what if we're leveraging zkTLS with banking system to verify financial data or, bank balances, transactions, KYCs, without relying on oracles and all of these other angles? There's just so many use cases, man. And like, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even really gone deep. And I think we're going to be seeing this as time progresses.
Hey, everybody. Quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network, consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Let's get back to the show.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. I think we would continue to see, various applications of this as more and more folks become concerned about the use of their data and the privacy of it. I mean, we see it today. We see so many different issues and problems with it, whether it's, leaked information, hacked information. So you can certainly see the different areas where zkPass can sort of help to solve or mitigate some of these problems. We've talked about what the tech does for the end users and the outcomes there. But for developers today, what does it look like? Is it folks building on, using zkPass as sort of like their stack? Or is it, ZK, offering the tool or the platform to various entities like banks? Or is it even both?
Yeah. No, thanks for that. It's the beauty about this technology is it can be leveraged in both sides, right? The user, as we said, because we're a user-centric sort of protocol that gives empowerment to them and their data, but businesses as well, because the important thing is think of it like, DeFi apps, they need to verify that a user controls a legitimate bank account, right? Well, they can leverage this type of technology. And yes, for us, we have a developer hub for anybody who's building any protocols, any projects that can leverage this, depending on whether it's from an identity perspective to, an actual Oracle need, it could work. And whether they're institutional side or just on the retail focus, this technology can be leveraged in multitude of ways. This is one of the reasons why, as I said, we're just at the tip of the iceberg, because all people or the prover needs to use for, let's say, the DeFi app, for example. DeFi is a big financial engine that kind of pushes things forward. Well, a prover just connects a bank account. They can use API like Plaid, right? And what they do is just receive confirmation that, there's an ownership, and zkTLS generates a proof that this is a valid response and it was received, and that's about it. Now, there's protection, there's security, there's trust. It should be that simple versus, hey, I have to log in, I have to download my statements, I have to upload it to show that I have my name is on there, to show that it is my account because of that transaction. You reveal so much without even realizing that. And wherever that server or that database where it's stored, when it gets hacked, that your information is there. Sometimes these compromises and hacks and systems that happen, it's really sometimes just like a small little error or leak that it could be both either from a user side or it could even be from, the actual systems or database or server side. And these could be prevented by cryptographic angles, right? And so engineers can literally come, whether they're Web 2, they could be building God knows what is, and they could just come and leverage this technology and provide that extra layer of trust for both them, their partners, and their users. Leveraging zkTLS and zkPass will provide this full-heartedly. And I'm actually always excited about this space because I've been fascinated by the ideas that have come where people say, hey, I'm building XYZ and I want to use zkTLS for this. We provided the infra, the Oracle, but the sheer geniuses that come out of the world that see things that we didn't even imagine is actually more rewarding than to give examples myself, because I'll tell you that the future is kind of going to be interesting if people leverage tech like this in its full capacity.
And you're talking about like how they're using it from like a use case perspective, that they say, hey, we're going to use this for interesting things that you guys did not envision could potentially be possible with your platform. That's what you mean.
And they ask, hey, is this possible? Sometimes they just ask to stress test. Hey, we're thinking about leveraging it for this way. What do you think? And even our engineers sometimes go back and like, oh, that's actually a very good idea. So these type of things, right? I wish I could share some of the most radical ones. There's also been some radical ones. I'm like, okay,
share some radical ones.
Nah, I can't. Not right now. But I was like, if you want to build it, sure, go ahead. But yeah, that's the beauty. You want to have this flow of ideations and the flow of curiosity. And that's, to me, what honestly makes it worth it, because we only wanted to provide the validity and authenticity of private data as an Oracle. And we started to also be inspired by builders, and that's, you can't ask for anything more than that, man, because it doesn't get boring.
Yeah, it kind of takes a life of its own.
There you go. And you know what? Any sector that starts to spawn up, like let's say decentralized science, like DeSci, right? You're looking at people with patient records or genomic sequences, and even these lab intellectual properties. And they are trying to figure out how to not get keep. Because if you think about pipelines of biotechnology or clinical trials or just even hospital, and they have to be IRB, HIPAA, right, GDPR, and they think, man, can this tech be used and will we be breaking any law? And it's so rewarding when we say no, depending on how we use it and how the information is shared. If you want users to share their data of, whether they have a certain illness or data that you want to use for study, and they can reward them, but this way they know what it's used for. And even for you guys, you get to incentivize to collect more data sets. Like, this is what happens. It's not just about banking or financial side or, like user access. It's also just like pushing the boundaries of certain research, certain innovations that are coming out. So when you mix those with cryptographic, you give flexibility And that is really more important to me, the way I see it, because sometimes people want to do certain things, but they can't because they don't want to break the laws. But what if tech can help augment what they need to do without breaking the law? And that's the key.
Now, I think you couldn't have, positioned or said it any better. You also talked about like how you're excited about this space. There are a lot of things that come up when folks talk about zero knowledge, and some of it confusing, some of it just, wrong. What do you think is the most, at least from your perspective, one of the most misunderstood aspects of zero knowledge proofs that you want to clarify?
I think people, so I can't speak for a lot of other companies and protocols, but most of the fear comes from compliance perspective because, adoption, I mean, look at Web3, right? It came from being banned and shunned upon to now being accepted and embraced. We're seeing companies now, Web3 companies going IPO. We're seeing traditional tech adapting Web3, and we're just seeing that, right? Like that was, I mean, it seems like a long time ago, but it took a few years. It was, in reality, compared to past adoption, it was fairly quick, right? And one could attribute some of this to AI adoption and advancement and COVID, whatever the means is or your justification is. The fact is that it's happening. And so with zero knowledge proof being a cryptographic approach, solely relying on private data, you start having a little bit of a concern of compliance. You also start to see doubts about regular traditional adoption for it, because traditional systems are sort of grandfathered in and they're set in a specific way. But, as I mentioned, because I can't speak for others, when we were building this, that was a big factor, because when we're more researcher at first than, like, let's say, I mean, we're cryptographic engineers, but it's more also research driven. And so we wanted to ensure that, okay, how do we ensure that IRB laws, HIPAA, GDPR, how do we ensure these are met, right? And that we're not breaking laws, first of all, for ourselves. And then secondly, for anybody who's building, leveraging us. And so compliance in verification was a big factor. We approached this from a perspective of, we're not going to access or store user data. It's the user's data, so they will have the access and storage of that. If it's a business, they get to opt into, as long as they meet the compliance. It's just verification or validation. And we even actually give businesses more ability to tap into new markets or users, or provide new business offering through this kind of tech, because they can avoid having to meet certain compliance laws if they do not touch those data. If all they need is verification and authenticity, that's really what the core is. It's like, how do you trust somebody without seeing everything? It's at the core of us human beings and core of most businesses and everything else, right? Core of marketing, whatever you name it. So from this perspective, some of the concern has always been the adoption. And I think it's just a matter of education, because as I mentioned, if you can come and say, hey, you don't have to worry about these laws because you're not actually breaking the laws, or you can still operate the way you want to operate, but you can add an access layer and also add a trust component with your end user, then they start to see it. And it's just now a matter of, how do we implement it? How does that get, coded into systems? Do they have to create new ones? Do they have to augment what they have? So it's the regular path of adoption. It's, hey, what about the user experience? Do I have to go and download wallets? Do I have to get redirected? Or, once you get the doubts of them breaking laws and things like that, then you can start to be creative, and then you can start to find ways. And we're seeing a lot of push in the boundaries, as I mentioned earlier. So though I can say that those are the things, I'm also very optimistic that in time, they won't be a big concern, similar to how the industry as a whole is also gaining traction.
Fantastic. I love the way you break that down. And as we talk about like adoption in the space, one of the other things I'm going to ask is around how zkPass is fitting into the broader AI blockchain ecosystem narratives, right? Like, especially with the rapid advancement in both fields, how are you guys approaching it? How are you guys, because in many ways it can be complementary. And, AI certainly has its own ethical issues. But then when
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking about proofs, how can you apply a lot of that to some of the issues we're seeing in AI today?
Yeah, I love AI, man. It's changed our lives and it's changing the world at such a rapid pace. But when it comes down to the core side of everything else, it's simply data. Everything has to do with data. So, did we know that AI would advance the way it has? No, but are we thankful? Absolutely. And most of the use cases that we have been seeing and talking to a lot of builders and founders is verifying and validating AI's sort of tasks as well, because there's a lot of companies that are building anywhere from agents to sequences and it could be, and it could touch finances, it could touch people's day lives and so forth, and it can also be an economic incentive of having people make more money from leveraging AI and putting it out there to do the day-to-day work. But how do you verify that? How will you pay if it's in marketplace, right? That has all these agents that do things. So there's always a need for verification and validation, because there's always going to be ways of kind of having these systems be vulnerable. So we are able to authenticate, as mentioned, and validate any of this sort of AI tasks and also how users are interacting with them. Right now, majority has been from a financial perspective, because that is a key point of impact, but it could be increased into a whole bunch of other factors. In the Web3 side, we've definitely seen, and actually not just Web3 and AI, and as a whole, we've seen a lot more use cases from traditional like industries that are finding this as one of the easy entry point into Web3, because when you have a technology like zkTLS, zkPass tech, and so forth, that enables people to interact with it, whether it's from Web2 or Web3, because all we're doing is verifying and validating data, then they can interact with Web3 feeling confident, because the first entry point is that of security, transparency, trust, and so forth. It's, because sometimes people are hesitant when all they're reading in the headline is the negative side of what's happening when you interact with this industry and you don't know, and the scammers, etc. So I think as an entry point, which arguably can come back to that whole identity side that you mentioned earlier, just knowing from a simple entry level that, this is a verified and validating, whether it's users that are interacting or whether it's something that they're doing, then it gives you a lot more trust. So I think it's at a core, because it's an oracle. People don't always see it because it should just be in the background. But the key is sometimes some of the most important tech are in the background, because they're not meant to be there to change how people interact. They're just there to augment and improve, how confident people are with interacting with these platforms.
Wonderful. All right. I mean, can you talk to us about like the broader roadmap for zkPass? There's a lot evolving, so would love to learn and hear more.
Yeah, we're doing quite a few things. We've been live as far as our protocol since last year. We have some impressive things lined up and coming up. Primarily, we're looking at, of course, building across the ecosystem. So, we've gotten inspired by a lot of users and a lot of people that are building different things, leveraging us or leveraging people that have similar tech in the industry. And what we wanted to do, even from the A round when we were finishing up last year, was to be able to start building tools, not only for developers, which we've done in like a dev hub and a few others. But now we're focusing also on what's coming up next, which is providing ecosystem support, people who are leveraging our protocol. We're going to have some ecosystem support for them very soon, with a few partnerships that are coming in to provide resources and such as well. And what we also want to do is introduce, applications and so forth in our ecosystem that make our end users' lives much easier and developers' lives easier. So please look out for that. Of course, the next thing is also going to be, I know a lot of people probably will ask about our TGE, which is very soon. NDAs prevent me from disclosing dates, but it's sooner than a lot of people think, and that's the excitement stuff. So this podcast comes at the right time. I don't even know it's just one of those divine alignment, if you call it. But yes, so very much a lot of exciting things that are coming up within our ecosystem. I urge everybody to look forward to it. I urge everyone to support if there's we're always available on X, and the team is always responsive. So whether it's me or anybody else on the team, we always respond to anybody DMing.
100%. We're going to be all here for it and excited to see the TGE come through. Final point. What else in crypto excites you outside of everything ZK?
Ooh, that question came out of curve. You know what? I'm really bullish on stables. I'm really bullish on stables, man. They excite me. It's going to be such a fascinating industry, and I think it's going to grow faster than people think, man. I mean, it's doing everything from cross-border to liquidity provision to, I mean, you name it. Ever since that Genius Act passed, also the floodgates opened. I feel like I see it start up getting funded. That's in stables almost monthly nowadays, right? I know it's not going to last. It's like one of those gold rush, but it is such an exciting thing. Institutions are in as well as retail. And so I would say stables because they give the global economy a way of interacting. And I think that's always going to help with a lot of GDPR, a lot of economies in a lot of countries. It's going to give access to crazy trade finance. It's just so much. I don't want to really go down that, but it is just so much. And so, yeah, I would say stables. I mean, there's a lot in the industry, AI, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, I've been reading a lot on stables. That's why.
That's what I live and breathe. So, yes, I'm right there with you, sir. But
Yeah.
no, this has been exciting. Thank you so much for taking the time here, man. Can't wait to have you back on, most likely after your TGE.
I look forward to it. It's always a pleasure talking to you or just running into you from time to time. I'm looking forward to also more updates from you guys and what's happening in the space, and I'll keep my ears open. So thank you for having me, man. It's been such a pleasure. I hope I answered the questions correctly there. I know you were throwing me curveballs and unexpected questions, but I love it. It keeps the mind flowing.
You're a pro at this,
I'm not at all. If you're speaking from the heart, you don't have to overthink it,
Very true. Very true. All right, my man. We'll have you on soon. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and give us a good 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts so you can get all the latest conversations from the most interesting founders, builders, and investors from across the world. Thanks so much and have a good one.